It is Indiana in the Morning. We're brought to you by First Commonwealth Bank, and our interviews are presented and protected by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Joining us this morning on the phone is an Indiana High native and Indiana High graduate. We're going to speak with John Esposito, who's going to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming Indiana County Chamber of Commerce luncheon at the KCAC. And John, are you in Nashville this morning?
I certainly am. Sunny day down here.
And it's a sunny day here in Indiana as well. John, we've spoken before on various programs here at Render Broadcasting. We want folks to know that you're the chairman and CEO of Warner Music in Nashville. Give us a little bit of background. What happened after you left Indiana High School, and how did you end up working in the music business in Nashville?
Well, as I joked to some people, I went across the street to IUP. I think my father asked me to get my own apartment, but I still brought my clothes home from my mom to wash. It was a pretty tough existence, and I was a journalism major there, so I got a degree in journalism. But the whole time I was doing that, I literally played in two bands. I was a DJ on WIUP. I wrote articles about music for the Pen. And I booked the concerts in coffee houses. So this was telling me something, though at the time I didn't imagine it would lead me to a role in the music business. I just knew I loved being around music. It's a circuitous route. I'll tell a little more in-depth version of it when I'm up there at the luncheon here in a couple of weeks. But basically, I ended up running record stores and through a path through Macy's, then through Mitsubishi, then through running a big record store in New York called The Wiz. I got hired by Polygram at the end of 1994, and that was the start of me being in the music majors, as they call it, and my passion for wanting to be inside and being close to the artist, which ultimately led to me running a record label.
What were some of the duties of that first record job that you had working for a record company? What sorts of things did you do on a daily basis?
So I was hired to be the head of catalog sales. Catalog is music. The definition in our world is anything that's 18 months or older, which people have stopped actively working because they're working the hits that are currently out there. And no one had ever had that position before. So Polygram took the chance and hired me out of this record retailer because they knew my extensive knowledge of music. And, I was a pretty well-trained businessman through the various companies that I was mentioning. And so my job was to bring records back to life through promotions, through creative campaigns. I actually only ended up doing that directly for about a year and a half, because then they asked me to build this whole division called Polymedia that did a lot of things. I don't want to bore your listeners, but in addition to developing catalog, we built what was called TV records, and there's a record series called Now. That's what I call music that had been successful in the UK, and I did the deal to bring that to the United States. I think the last count I saw has sold 350 million copies. It's on volume like 52 at this point. But, it was just anything to bring to life records that, could have gone just to the back shelves, if not getting cut out, was my fun job at Polygram.
Yeah, it's apparent that that's something that you really enjoyed.
I did, and I also learned in the process that it's possible for another company to come and buy your company. And one day when we all heard, oh my God, we're going to be bought by Universal, I thought the world was over, but I thought, well, this is definitely going to make for interesting times. And that's when, through the merger process, they asked me to come and be the general manager of this newly created record label called Island Def Jam. That was 1999. Now when I got my first taste of working active actively with new artists.
Mm-hmm. Your current position as chairman and CEO of Warner Music in Nashville. How did you come to land that spot?
Well, so I did the Island Def Jam thing for about 4 years, and I got a call from the chairman of Warner, who asked me if I would come over to run his distribution company, which is basically being the head of sales. Back in the day when they still had record stores, to make sure that the 32,000 storefronts had our CDs in them. And because I had experience through Polygram with sales, I thought, well, I'm equipped for this, and I could be the president of something. So a little over 17 years ago, I took the role of being the president of what they called WEA, Warner Electric Atlantic. But it was about, I would say, 2 years into that it wasn't that I was bored or demanding, but I said to him, now that I've worked for a record label, I need to run a record label. So let's figure out which one I'm going to run someday. It took 7 years, but I had a lot of fun in the old job of creating other business units. And one day, almost 11 years ago, they said, would you like to move to Nashville and help us fix our floundering record label down there? And I'd been to Nashville many, many times. I was in love with Nashville. So I said, absolutely, let's do it. And September of 2009, I took the role of running Warner Music Nashville.
We're speaking this morning here on Indiana in the Morning with Indiana native John Esposito, the chairman and CEO of Warner Music in Nashville. Now, being in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, do a lot of the people that you work with, are they on the country side of the charts?
Well, my label is all country, so my roster includes Blake Shelton, Kenny Chesney, Dan and Shay. I like to say Pittsburgh's own Dan and Shay because Dan is from Pittsburgh. They're about as hot as any act is in the business right now. Brett Eldridge, Cole Swindell, a number of artists that your listeners may have heard of because we do quite well in the Pittsburgh area concert scene. So my whole domain is country.
Are you pleased the way country music has evolved to what it is today?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I said, are you pleased with the way that country music has evolved into the sound that it has today?
Yeah, I get asked questions quite often. They just did an interview for me. If anybody's really bored, Google Esposito re-ups. They just extended my contract, and Billboard broke the news last week. And during the interview, this gal asked me, if Dan and Shay can have a song out with Justin Bieber, which we do, and it's a worldwide smash, does that mean that country music is opening up about the boundaries? And I told her, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. The music that we are getting away with playing today, signing, putting out, is a lot more expansive, for a lack of a better word, than it was 10 years ago when I took over the label. But that's the kind of cycles that country music has gone through many times. There was a moment when Kenny Rogers came into country music that it was considered pop, and people were not that happy about it, But great music is the definition of country music. It's what country listeners will listen to. And, Blake Shelton is reasonably traditional. Kenny Chesney gets away with being the island boy, but, I think the groundingness of country music beyond the music bed is that lyrically, country music, they are some of the cleverest lyricists that have ever been put on the planet Earth. They tell a story. They don't overtell a story. And quite often those stories are about as emotional as it gets. And that's a huge reason I love working in this genre. It's, and on top of that, I'm telling you, these artists, I'm rattling these names like Blake and Kenny off. They're the nicest people you'll ever meet on the planet Earth. Having worked at some other places in the business, I've met some artists who I wouldn't put in that category. But country artists tend to be just level-headed. They show up on time. It's a pretty great ecosystem that I get to work in.
I've had the opportunity to speak with Phil Vassar a number of times, and for a while he lived here in Indiana. And you're right, he's one of the nicest guys you could ever talk to.
I had no idea that Phil lived in Indiana for a while.
The first thing
I see him down here from time to time.
Well,
next time I see him, I'm going to hit him up on that.
The last time he was here for our FOP show, the first thing he did was he took his band up to the Coney Island to get some Coney dogs. So, yes.
That's awesome.
Mention Indiana to Phil, and I'm sure he'll have some stories to tell you. Quickly, John, what sort of things will we be talking about at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon?
Well, they've asked me to give a bit of the story of my life, so it'll be an expanded version, albeit the 15 to 20-minute version of how a kid, ultimately from Punxsutawney, but who grew up in Indiana from the age of 11 on, made it to, this success in a demanding business and obviously fun business. So I'll tell you some of the funny stories along the way. I'll probably weave in some stuff about, the impact of Indiana on me. My father, some of you may remember, ran Citizens Ambulance Service. He started Citizens Ambulance Service, and, it was a funny connection to be in town as one of Jerry's boys. Yeah. That was the name of the extended group of guys that worked for him, but I was actually one of Jerry's boys. And
well, John, we're out of time, so we're going to have to wait for the rest of those stories. And thanks so much for joining us this morning.